Welcome to Recross the Paths, where we celebrate the Cube community one conversation at a time. My name is Cade. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Max and Sakari. Terve, guys, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Terve. Nice to talk to you, Cade.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Great that you reached out.
I'm so stoked to sit down. We are many, many miles apart at present. I'm in my home base in Oklahoma. You guys are chatting from the great nation of Finland, way out there.
Yeah, we're both from Helsinki.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. Well, this is a joy to sit down. There's a lot that we get to unpack together. We got first connected because I came across a post that you all put together about an event that you run called Motticon. Am I pretty close on that one?
Yeah, pretty close.
Close enough.
Close enough.
I'm sure I will fail on some of those. But then getting to know some of what you guys are working on, how the community looks in Finland. I'm excited to dive in. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
So first, for each of you, why Cube? Why is this something you care about? Sakari, let's start with you.
For me, it was a natural fit. You don't have the time to grind out all the limited sets which come out because, as we know, that there are plenty of sets coming out each year, so no time to focus. And also, like me and Max, we have this pro mindset or pro grinder mindset, especially regarding limited. That's the sort of our ballpark which we've been most into. And yeah, we've been playing with Max for over 25 years or so. We've known each other so quite a while.
Yeah.
And Cube was sort of a natural fit for us in that sense.
And you mentioned kind of the grinder sensibility. Was that something that like you were playing competitively leading up into that?
Yeah, so we were playing competitively, maybe me not so much, Max more or less, former national champion, Pro Tour top 8 finishes under his belt, so he's been there, that path. I've only had one Pro Tour, but that's the sort of scene that we've been at, especially at our local game store, where the environment has been very competitive, and Tommy Hovi, Tommy Valamies, these sort of former Pro Tour players, Hall of Famers, they've been like very active in our local game store when we were a bit younger and they were a bit older than us. But yeah, I think it comes from that. So Cube was the sort of natural expansion to, if you don't have the time to do everything, then you just focus on one thing, and Cube has been it for quite some years.
Absolutely. Well, and Max, I know Sakari downplaying only one Pro Tour feature. How about you? How does Cube fit for you?
Yeah, I was trying to think about this. Honestly, I can't remember kind of when I started playing Cube. We also tried to figure this out with Sakari, like going back, trying to think of like some events and stuff. But like a couple of touch points there. So first of all, like I've owned like most of the Power 9 for like a long time. I remember like, I think it was like 2004 or something. Like they were playing vintage at my local shop and I bought pieces of Power and traded and whatever. So I kind of had those. And then I think one avenue of Cube was like just having somewhere to play that, because I don't think there had been any vintage tournaments in Finland since like 2010 or something. So we're sitting in the binder. So that was like one thing. Had a vintage cube, get to play it. I also had this kind of weird pseudo pre-cube thingy. The format that just here was called DC10, which is like you have just a big pile of cards and you draw a card and you play the cards without any mana cost, etc. So I kind of piled for that, and it kind of morphed into a cube at some point. And I do think I've had like a vintage cube for, I would say, 15 years now.
Yeah.
And we had a friend who had a cube. I had his friends who used to be roommates. There was like 3 Magic players, and one of them used to organize this invitational style event where it would be a bunch of us that knew each other come together and you should play for like a 2-day event, and you played a bunch of like weird formats, like backdraft, or one of them was like an auction for decks that were made by random people on the internet, and like
Stipulations and
all these crazy formats. And I think that was also something, where we used the cube for something. And I think, as Sakari said, especially these days, it is a format that, well, it doesn't say the same, it changes a bit. So there is like slight changing, but it doesn't change as quickly as if you just play, say, the newest draft format on Magic Arena, which changes very frequently. And that can be tough if you don't have time to kind of keep up with it, which, yeah, we talked about all 3 of us having children, and that's kind of definitely a limiting factor in how much time you have compared to before.
Everything takes time, yeah.
Yeah.
one thing to add, I remember my first sort of Cube experience. It was not playing, but I remember in 1999, at a local game store, we had a person and he was making a draft box, and he called it like cube in Finnish, but the idea was to have a draft box of the Earth block. Like you have some amount of rares and uncommons, and the idea was that it was a set that you could draft. You didn't need to buy boosters every time to draft it. But I remember that was sort of the first thing that I heard. Okay, you can do that, but that was in 1999, so it's quite a while back.
And one thing which I also was going to say is that at least I think when we started in the early 2000s, drafting was very popular in Finland. At least among the professional players, they cared a lot about limited, and I think they were pretty good at it. It used to be kind of people would joke that the US players were really bad at draft at the Pro Tour, but being good at constructed. And they hear it kind of the opposite, that people often didn't do so well in constructed because they spent so much time drafting in preparation for tournaments. So I think then naturally there was considering there weren't that many players here, it was still easy to launch a draft. And there was this kind of interest in drafting over constructed. I think it also led to these things being a whole thing.
Yeah, regarding the pro circuit back then, the thing was that the Finns were always very good in limited, but not very good in constructed. So nobody was that interested in cracking up constructed. What's it about? But everybody wanted to draft. I think at our local game store there was a draft launching basically every day. There was always it wasn't a huge local game store, but still the drafts were launching. And the level of play was very high because there was all the Finnish pros who were at that time on the circuit, they were drafting. And I remember when me or Max, when we started out drafting, it was brutal because they were I'm just fresh off starting to play, and what's this draft about? And then there's the person sitting next to me is 2-time Pro Tour champion, so the level was a bit high.
So it's like being thrown into the deep end to learn to swim. You just have to jump in and figure it out right away.
Yeah, and at that time it was also the draft was so that you didn't get to keep the cards.
Okay, so they would provide the cards and then you just...
No. Everybody just opened the boosters and then you just draft, and the person who won the draft, he get to first have the 2 picks. The one who came second, he could have 2 picks, and the person who won got the rest. So basically,
it was kind of high stakes,
draft.
yeah.
It was very high stakes, especially if you're a teenager who doesn't have infinite amount of bankroll. So it was a very tough and competitive environment. But on a flip side, if you manage to win out the draft, the feeling is so great. I beat all these people who are Pro Tour regulars, and I got all this huge amount of cards because I won the draft. So the feeling was quite great.
Max, was that your experience as well? Or were you one of the Pro Tour guys doing the?
No, I was the newbie at that point. I didn't really have much. I think at one point I went back and looked at some of my earliest tournament results, and I think my second tournament ever was a Pro Tour qualifier, and I went 0-5 or something. And the next tournament was also a Pro Tour qualifier, which I also went 0-4. So maybe I didn't make the smartest choices on what to play in the beginning compared to maybe other people like F and M. And after 2 years, you try something more competitive. So, yeah.
But you're here now. You're still playing.
Yes,
you're still doing it.
And it was interesting. I think that this was just before Magic Online was released, and then I think the kind of interest once Magic Online was released kind of died down a bit. People were just so much easier to draft online than come to the store. So then, unfortunately, the live drafts died down a bit.
And how is the scene in Finland presently? I know Helsinki is just probably one hub of where people can connect, but what's that experience like for y'all?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what angle you take. Helsinki is maybe the hub for Cube. There are lots of people who are interested. We have this very loose group of people. We play at our the office where I work. It's in the center of Helsinki, so it's a nice place where everybody can come to fairly easy. We have a group where we play very loose in that sense that if somebody wants to join our group, then they're welcome to do so. I think when we started organizing our tournament, the Motticon, which you said earlier, we wanted to sort of get a grasp of how many people are there who are interested in Cube. Are people designing cubes, not just in Helsinki, but people we don't even know about? And I think one thing led to another. Tampere, which I think is the second largest city in Finland, they have a really big community, but that's, I think, mostly revolves around constructed formats.
Yeah, I think they play Legacy and Modern, I think, mostly.
They play Legacy, Modern, Old School,
Yeah.
being these kinds of things. They're more into constructed, and they have weekly tournaments launching like quite well compared to Helsinki, which is very fractured and fragmented. The community when it comes to constructed formats.
And then there's, I guess, the third big hub is Turku, which is the third largest city. And there's this European Highlander format, which is a 100 card Highlander format, best of three, one versus
Yeah.
one games. Those are, at least the past years, have been the largest tournaments in any format in Finland. Is the thing they throw together, I think, once a year. So that's been very popular here for a number of years. I guess that's what's the current situation. I mean, and then there's like smaller shops that have these PPTQs and stuff. The biggest tournaments are kind of the not part of the official organized play. They're the legacy, nationals. There's Premodern is also fairly popular. Highlander, etc. These kind of community formats and or kind of older card pool formats.
I mean, that's encouraging. Those are all formats I enjoy and are very tough to make fit around here. But does it still feel pretty competitive on average? I know you spoke to that as kind of an experience getting in.
To some extent, it's the people who, for instance, are very into Legacy, they play only Legacy. And then we have these Legacy Nationals once a year. I think there are like 100, 150 people somewhere in that ballpark. And it's sort of people who only play Legacy, they travel across the country to sort of get to that tournament. There are also cash prizes and those which incentivize people. But I think it more or less, if you're into some format, you will find a chance to have like a big tournament once a year which focuses on that specific format.
To me, maybe it isn't, but it feels like it's gotten a bit less competitive just because the Wizards organized play structure has changed. I think there was this kind of sweet spot in, I don't know, maybe like 2010 to 2015 or something, or a bit beyond that, where like we had the direct like PTQs that would feed directly to the Pro Tour. Those would usually have like 100 players maybe. They would be in different cities in the country. People would travel to them, and people would maybe like playtest. Now it feels like, I don't know, it's a bit more kind of loose. At least when I kind of follow from the side people who still try to kind of grind to get in the Pro Tour, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, you kind of show up haphazardly to a PPTQ and, oh, yeah, it's like 11 players, and then you get the slot, and then you travel to a random European city for the RPTQ and stuff like that. So, and certainly the RPTQ is certainly more competitive, but I think it's just maybe a nature of the current organized play program, which has kind of changed the scene a bit also.
You don't have to memorize your DCI number anymore.
I still remember it though.
Yeah. Me too.
Well, speaking of regular tournaments, let's talk about Motticon.
Sure.
This is one of the things that drew me to connecting. In the United States, we talk a lot about the small local tournaments, and this is not small that way, but trying to just gather people in your area to do Cube in a more organized way. Can you guys speak to how did this come about? What is this?
Yeah. Well, I think the most difficult part was choosing a name. So that was the first thing. So Motti is a Finnish term which means 1 cubic meter of firewood. So if you have a cabin and you want to warm up the sauna, you need to make the firewood. And Motti is the sort of metric for 1 cubic meter of firewood. That's where the name comes from. Me, Max, and we have a third person, Alexi, who is the third organizer. We've known each other for plenty of years, and we were neighbors and everything. So we had amongst us, how many cubes? Like 10, maybe more, like several cubes. And we wanted to sort of play them out and figure like, okay, let's map first, like, are there people who would be interested? Are there people who have their cubes of their own? And we wanted to have this sort of proof of concept. And in 23, we started planning, like, how would we arrange this thing that have a cube tournament? And we contacted people also from the United States, the people who organize CubeCon. Like, how are you doing things and what's the sort of deal with that? And wanted to map out the structure and how it would fit and everything. So that's when we started the planning phase. And in 24, we had the first Motticon, but it was more of this proof of concept. It wasn't an open tournament as such. It was basically us, our friends, and friends of them. So friends of friends. and we wanted to sort of keep it tight, and because it was the first time we tried to organize something like that, and we wanted to test how it works and everything. So I think that if you can, Max, add on to that. So
Yeah, I was trying to think at the very beginning. I think it kind of started almost like a joke. We're like, what if we organize the cube tournament? Like me and Sakari have never really organized. Never organized tournaments. We've certainly organized events. I've organized for previous years these kind of again kind of invitational style events, but there's usually like 8 players. They're all friends. We play, at my house or something. So that's more like the organizing bit is like figuring out like weird formats, but not really like the organizing as such of like the logistics, setting up tables. What do we do? Like, I think Alex has a bit. I think he's organized like some smaller events where he lives, but none of us really have that TO experience. So that was kind of we were like, can we do it? I don't know, maybe because I think we wanted something where Cube is often played super casually if there's like no stakes. You wanted something where you can kind of the formats can be Cube, the playing can be fun, but it's also a tournament, so there's also some kind of stakes. So like because sometimes when you go into a Cube, people they have decided before they open the first pack what they will be forcing. I will draft Storm now. And you know what? That's fine. That's one experience. You can do that. But then there's like avenues to do that, like Arena, Magic Online. And it's not really, then you maybe just draft and like, then maybe you leave after your first round. You don't play all your games because, this didn't work out. So you want something where you kind of focus a bit more in every draft of like, not like mega try hard, but somewhere in between like the super try hard and the super casual. I think that's kind of the thought, at least for the first year. And then it was a lot of effort the first year. I think every year it's gotten easier because kind of we know we're doing some things have been sorted out, solved, some processes and so on. That was especially the first year, thinking about all kinds of processes, especially when it comes to card kind of safety. So stuff doesn't get stolen, stuff doesn't, actually accidentally get, destroyed or water damaged or stuff like that.
that was sort of the first step that we're figuring out, okay, let's say we organize this cube event, a tournament where we have like 50 people, we know most of them, but not all of them. So how do we make sure that no Mox Diamonds or something gets stolen or damaged or whatever? Like, how do we make it as tight as possible in a sense, but the play experience still needs to be like easy enough for players to engage. And also one thing that we had, like, me and Max and Alex, we also want to play in that tournament. So
Right.
how do we keep the head count as low as possible? So we both work in IT, so I guess it came natural. Let's do our own application to run the tournament, and let's do it ourselves. And we try to talk to, or Max, I think you talk with the people at KubeCon, like what software they use and so on. But in the end, we ended up like building our own software, where the person, if you draft the cards, you take a picture of it and it stores the photo, and we remind people like, okay, you have now the picture, those are your cards, they don't belong to you, but you're sort of borrowing them for the draft being, after which you have to return them, and we can verify that nothing gets sort of misplaced or anything. So yeah, it was very this high-tech approach to a tournament. Let's do it ourselves and with IT and so on.
Yes.
I love how many tools in the Cube community have come about because somebody says, I need a resource for this. I'll just build it. I will just make this. And if I'm recalling correctly, you mentioned in one of our messages before that part of that software is also doing like match results and other elements of the tournament structure, right?
Yeah, it handles everything basically. So the only thing it doesn't really handle, there's no payment handling. So we collect the payments elsewhere, but we basically add the players to the tournament and they can see themselves in the tournament. And before the tournament starts, they are able to make these cube preference selections. I'll get back to that in a bit. But then once the tournament starts, they, it shows them, okay, this is your draft table, go there, this is your seat. Then, once the draft portion is done, you take the picture of your pool, it uploads it. Then when the round starts, it says where you're playing, against who you're playing. It also, by the way, randomizes who goes first.
Nice.
We thought we'd have more, change resistance to that, but people were, the first time we introduced it, we were like, okay, sure. So it does that as well. After the event, we can also kind of release stats on who was the luckiest and unluckiest because we just pull up the database logs on who won, 9 out of 9 coin tosses. But then after the round is done, you just enter your results there in the app directly, and then that is that. So you don't need to have any match slips. You don't need to call a judge. You don't need to go to a desk where someone is taking the results. After the draft is done, also when you play your last round, after you finish the results, you can see there's a link to see your opponent's pool. So basically, while you're sitting there with your opponent, you lay out the cards the same way as they were when you took the first photo, and then you just swap seats with your opponent, and then you verify that all the cards are there for your opponent, and then you take the pools back to the tournament organizer desk, and then you're kind of done.
Yeah, so basically your last round opponent verifies that you have all the cards which you drafted, which means that all the cards get returned to their correct place. And so on. So we wanted to keep the staffing at a minimum, which means that the tournament is very self-serving in a sense that we have everything goes through the application and so on.
Yeah, and judges can focus on like the play judge calls with matches, and there's still stuff to do for the tournament organizer, aka Alexi, to take the pools once they're done. But I think the preference selection is interesting because as far as I know, in KubeCon works a bit differently, and maybe it's less of a synchronous tourney as we are running. It's more like, I guess, pods launching with now and then, and you can kind of before each draft select your preferences. We had going into this event, we had kind of a couple of things we wanted to achieve. We wanted people to get to draft the cubes they want because we knew we were going to have different kinds of cubes. We're going to have the more like limited S cubes, and we're going to have the vintage cubes and everything in between. So some people want some experiences, some people want the other. And then we wanted people to kind of know in advance. So we let people know like a week in advance, okay, these are 3 cubes you're going to be drafting. Just so people aren't like showing up on the tournament day like, I have no idea what any of these cards do. Because some of the cards these days have a lot of text.
Yes.
And in order for things to move smoothly, the drafts in the tournament are timed as they would be in like previously GP Day 2 or Pro Tour. So we have a bit more pick time per pick, but still it's timed, so you can't just sit there and read, all Universes Beyond cards for like 7 minutes. So we want people to like at least, it's up to them if they read the Cube Cobra, list or not, but at least they have the opportunity. So that's why we're getting kind of people to submit the preferences. This year you could select 6 or 7. So basically you put them like number 1, this is the one I want to draft the most, and then like from there down, and the top one gets the most of your kind of preference points, which then our algorithm does its magic and then tries to get as many of those preference points used as possible, and it's worked pretty well. I think this year it was something like 90-95% of the optimal strategy.
Yeah, so I think the thing has been that when we start the tournament, we enroll the cubes, we'll say, okay, there are 20 cubes to pick from. Go ahead, pick whichever you like, sort them in a preference manner, like 1 through 6. And then we have this very complex algorithm, which we run like 10,000 times, which tries to get the optimal points for each person in a sense that the most amount of people can draft the most cubes that they definitely would want to draft. So it's very, very high tech.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and like you said, trying to make sure that the people who have come to this event get to experience the things that they're after as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's quite an accomplishment across 20 cubes. How did you source that in your community, aside from providing many of them yourselves?
Even before the first year, we did a survey on the Finnish Magic Discord, just like asking, hey, are there cubes and what kind of cubes are there and stuff. So we kind of had that. And then when we announced the event, then we also kind of asked around people. And do you, Sakari, remember, I think you did a lot of the sourcing last year.
Yeah, so after the survey, we said that, okay, we're going to have this kind of event. Do you have any cubes? If so, please report them. Would you like to have your cube featured in this tournament? If so, please tell us what's your cube about, what's the thing that sort of triggers it, who is it meant for, and so on. And based on that, we make this roughly 20 cubes, which people can choose from. We usually exclude, like, I think the number 1 cube that people have in general are vintage cubes. So we don't want to have, like, basically 4 vintage cubes which are very similar. it doesn't sort of make any sense. So we have Max's Vintage Cube, which is our sort of gold standard. It's very similar to the ones which is on Magic Online or Arena or the one which LSB and the guys draft. So
yeah,
it's very standardized Vintage Cube. But then we also have there, for instance, which has been also, I think, each year very popular, this sort of the first Magic Online Holiday Cube. I think it's from 2014 or so.
2014.
Yeah, but
Nice,
that's basically
yes.
locked, so that format doesn't change. But that has also been like very popular with people.
And you mentioned like that some of the popularity in Finland is around some of these older formats, modern, legacy, pre-modern, vintage. Does that reflect in the cube preferences as well?
I think definitely. So I think first year we had Premodern Cube. We also had this Premodern Masters, which is sort of a custom limited set, which focuses on pre-modern. And then there has been old border cubes, and those have been fairly popular. So I think there is some enticement. I think the local Finnish community is, I wouldn't say old, but people who are sort of in it have started playing in their teenage years, like a very young age, and have been doing so for quite a while. So there is this certain nostalgia towards cards like Morphling or Masticore or like those kinds of things. So I think that is also reflected in when people pick out the cubes that they want to draft in Motticon. So those are like fairly popular apart from Vintage Cube. Our most popular cubes are of course Vintage Cube, and then we have one surprise cube which differs each year. So there's no knowledge beforehand what's it going to be, or like it can be basically anything, and that has been really a popular cube that people have picked, and it varies from year to year.
So surprise meaning like they don't know what is in it before they pick it. You just have to pick it and you get dropped into it.
It can be whatever.
There is no information. Actually, before the first time we did this, we asked people so we didn't do it the first year, we did it last year, and then now this year. We asked people in our event Discord, if we did something like this, would you like to have like no information, or would you like to have like a description but not the exact card list? And the majority were like nothing. They want nothing. So that's what we've done. We give them nothing. Last year, the surprise cube was a desert cube. So you had to draft the land. So basically just before draft started, there was a paper on the table that said like, you may not add additional lands. That was kind of the only information we gave them. Yeah, I guess it said that there's, this many cards and all of them are used. They used, I think, 3 packs of 18 or something, a non-standard number. But yeah, that's kind of the level of information you get, and then you go from there.
Yeah, and then in the tournament, we try to have the people who are drafting the surprise cube in a different room, so that there is no this sort of outside interference. And we try to tell the people, like, look, there are other people who are coming to draft this in the next draft or the draft after, so please don't spoil the fun. Of course, we can't prevent it, so if people talk, they talk, but we try to sort of keep it enclosed and sort of keep this mysteria regarding that.
Yeah, like you have to sign a paper. I will not talk about this cube.
NDA. Yeah, NDA.
Yeah, we should have an NDA, definitely. But I think the hardest part has been regarding these surprise cubes. We have this group who we draft with at our office and so on, but we try to keep it hidden from them as well. So basically, we have designed a cube each year of these 2 times, but with 0 play testing.
Yeah.
Basically, it's
0 play testing.
All in our heads and like several spreadsheets and going through the motions and like, okay, now we need a forecasting cost removal spell for this color and like try to sort of match things out.
Because last year was so very, very easy when we made this desert cube with 0 playtesting. This year we made a cube with all custom cards. So the idea was to take, what if the alpha set had been done in 2026 with like current like a fire design philosophy. Me and Alex did this project. It was kind of his idea. So we made a cube which was entirely new cards. So we used the original art and name. So there's like Birds of Paradise, Armageddon, Lightning Bolt, etc. from Alpha, but the effects are not entirely. Some of them are like, there's a couple of cards which are actually the same because we couldn't find a better alternative for example, Lightning Bolt and Counterspell. But then we reworked some, for example, Ancestral Recall is blue sorcery draw 3. Time Walk is a 4-mana take a turn. And then there's stuff that's just like entirely different from what the original card does. So additional challenge from the players, basically seeing 15 new cards they've never seen in every pack. But also with zero playtesting. Yeah.
It sounds like it really compounds, that experience with Cube. You're often seeing cards you've seen elsewhere in a new context. But this is seeing cards you've seen before, but it's
Yeah.
not those cards. It's
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
different type of
Yeah.
challenge.
We kind of set ourselves up to fail now because this is probably like the most complex you can do is create like your own custom set for Cube. So then for next year, like, can we top this, or maybe we need to kind of lower the stakes a little bit again?
Well, you mentioned designing without getting the playtest, especially with the hidden things. One of the things that I remember reading in your design articles about the Premodern Masters that you worked on was building with DX-driven data. Could you speak to that concept a little bit?
Yeah, sure. We are people who started playing in the pre-modern era. That was sort of our main era in terms of draft and constructed and so on. And we wanted to make a limited set based off of cards that are from that era, but it should feel like this modern draft experience. So if you think about Wilds of Eldraine, they had, I think it was the first set, but they had this signpost uncommon. So a multicolored uncommon, which really incentivizes you to be in that specific archetype. And we wanted to have this kind of draft experience that there are these signpost uncommons which are super strong compared to the rest of the things, but you really need the things to sort of click and come together in that sense. But it should incentivize you to go on a distinct path and try to sort of map out and draft a deck around the powerful uncommons. But yeah, there was like me, Max, and Alexi, and then we had another person, Kim, who helped us out. And I think we spent hundreds of hours diving into pre-modern cards and what do they do and what were the archetypes and what can we even make. And it's really difficult because back then the color pie was focused on allied color pairs. So
That's right.
basically, for instance, the blue-red archetype as such was very difficult to master because they don't mix at all together. Red spells are land destruction and direct damage, and blue spells are counter spells and card draw. So what's the synergy? What's the thing that is going on there? So that was a very difficult project. For instance, we had this issue that, okay, now we need a green removal spell, because at that time, fight spells didn't exist as such. But then we had a couple of things, for instance, Homeland's Common Roots, which is this 4-mana aura, which taps a creature. I don't actually remember, does it tap the creature, but it doesn't let it untap. And then from Mirage, there's this rare core Triangle of War, which is 1-mana colorless artifact, and for 2 you can sack it and then your creature and the opponent's creature fight. So we need to really deep dive, like scraping the bottom of the barrel, like we need these type of effects for these color synergies to be in a sense that they actually do work. And that was quite a challenge, but I think it came along very well. I actually talked with an Italian person on Discord, on the Premodern Discord. He asked me a couple of questions about Premodern Masters. He had read the article, like he made the set and they've been drafting it in Italy. The person I don't know at all, but
Wow.
yeah, but it has really gotten some like traction in that sense.
Yeah, I remember there was another player, I think some years ago, who also asked us, and they were like making a copy of their own to play. So I think that was, yeah, very interesting. Like 4 of us working on that set, people had their kind of own strengths, and definitely helped to have many people to maybe come up with ideas that, if I had designed it myself, solo, wouldn't have thought of. I remember we did at least some iteration. I think we kind of got all the cards for our initial version, then we played it, I think, once or twice, and then we changed, I think, one archetype entirely or something, like one color.
Yeah, we had red-black zombies, and that was like so bad and awful that we needed to get rid of that.
Yeah, changed to goblins, I think.
Yeah, but I think the trigger for this came because we wanted to do this pre-modern cube. But then we realized that the power level, like differences between cards are like vast. Like on the one hand, you can have like Masticore, and on the one hand, you have like 2-mana 1/1 Shadow, which gets +1/+1 when it attacks. Like nobody wants to play the other card. Like, and there were like no synergies whatsoever. So we wanted to focus on having a cube, which would be this modern limited environment, and build around these signpost uncommons and focusing on that, like what's the sort of best modern limited set that you can sort of think of, and wanted to have a draft experience which matches that, but with these old cards.
So that's interesting. With Premodern Masters, I think you described it as not a cube. Like, do you think of it as a cube, or is it something different in your mind?
I guess it depends a bit on like in a sense it is. I guess like it's a set cube. because it does have like there's like 4 or 5 of each of the commons, and then there's like
4.
multiples of the uncommons. So Kindle, accumulated knowledge, get better. Like you could never play those if you just have one-offs. So they kind of, and then
Muscle
the other
sliver.
things as well. Yeah, the slivers feed off each other. So kind of need that. Like I think you can call it a cube, or you can call it something else. Maybe when we did it, so that was I guess 2020, because I think we just got it, or 2019, we just got it done before the pandemic started, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah, maybe back then cube design was more simple than it is now, and the standard for cube design was like the 1x of stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't come up with the structure in the sense of having multiples of something. Like certainly there were these, for example, the Innistrad draft cubes where people try to recreate like that draft environment through having like multiples of some cards. So considering the card pool that we worked with, quite limited in a sense still. Like if you think about like now if you design a cube using all of Magic's cards, it's like I don't know how many, 17,000 or something.
Oh, yeah. Nowadays, we are coming up on 35,000 unique cards.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, I was off by 2x, which is
only
scary.
it's close. What's 2x between friends here?
Yeah. So considering this, I mean, I'm still surprised that it has so much replayability. We've certainly played it tens of times, Premodern Masters, and it still somehow works. Certainly there are some color combinations are better than others, but still it kind of has the replayability, and somehow we managed to do a lot of stuff that works, which is surprising. But I guess, yeah, we did a lot of iteration on it and such, so.
So you have these great design articles where you talk about working through putting Premodern Masters together. I wanted to ask, what did that look like practically working together with multiple people to engage with a project like this?
Tons of Excel spreadsheets that we had.
Yeah, and I do think we also probably talked on the phone a lot.
Yeah.
Or in maybe some group calls or something.
Yeah, we have many. Like actually, we started our own like Discord server, mostly relating to the designing and everything. Now it has sort of ballooned into something totally different.
Yeah.
But
it's called Premodern Masters, but now it's like when some people join it. I mean, it's still a very small one, but when people join it, like we organize our live cube drafts there, and somebody might join and be like, "Why is this draft? Why isn't this like Helsinki Cube Discord or something?"
Got to know your roots.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. I've used the same spreadsheets for designing some, like I have also other sets. I think I had done before that. I had done a kind of, I call it Limited Masters, which is kind of also trying to just create my own version of I guess the Modern Masters sets before Modern Horizons, which were just reprints. So I did one of those. Like I wanted to have like really cool, and I tried to get like unique archetypes, like the red-white archetype is cycling, and the red-green archetype is walls. It's like a non-standard stuff. I use those documents, and it's just kind of based on like you have your colors, and it's like mana cost, creatures, and spells and stuff, and then rarities. I think we kind of each of us worked a bit, and then we would maybe see what the other person had as ideas, and then go from there. I think probably the difficult part was coming up with the archetypes. And then it's kind of one of those. It's kind of easier to start finding individual cards to add. Especially, I think one very rewarding thing is finding cards which fit into multiple archetypes. That's very.
If I can touch upon that issue, I think that was our biggest hurdle in terms of finding cards which match several archetypes. I think it was sort of at the very end we found out that okay, you can have in Urza Saga there's this card called Monk Idealist, which is a cleric, which is relevant for this black-white cleric theme, but it also returns an enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand, which it fits the enchantress, which is green-white archetype, but then we needed to swap out the black dark banishing type effect for Seal of Doom, because it's an enchantment, so you can sort of loop that, and we need to find these ways that these commons can work in different archetypes altogether, and there will be multiple archetypes competing for those certain effects. So I think it has this good old philosophy where none of the cards are in that sense good by themselves. Maybe the uncommon ones are, but rarely the commons are good by themselves. But you need to have multiples of those different ones which sort of combined they are more powerful than each one would be individually.
Yeah, I think there's something fascinating about this project where it was designed in a way by committee, that you're working with a bunch of different folks to do that.
That's very good. That's a very good point, Kate. That's actually one thing that we talked about and that we wrote about Usually, I think cube design is this kind of lone wolf project where this one person designs the cube and focuses on the experience or aesthetics or whatever they focus on. So I think in that sense it was a very unique take that we had this sort of committee-like approach to it, and what works and what doesn't. It's a very different type of design work, which usually I think most of the cubes are designed by one person, and it's sort of their project. And this was a shared project, and we had a common goal. And of course we had some like disagreements, but they were like, in the end I think they were very minor because the playtesting hammered out what works and what doesn't. And we also had this common goal of, as you said, this DX, the drafter experience, the drafting experience, and of course play experience should be like on the forefront. So at least in 2019, it was a unique take that we are designing a cube as a committee, not just one person.
I think that's still a unique take, at least in my broad experience. It's not commonly happening. But it seems like that's been a core of how you all have engaged from the beginning in a way. Almost all the projects that you have are labeled with, here's the list of credits from people who've contributed. In a positive way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've done, even our solo cubes, I think. Sakari has this mono blue cube, and we have spent many, many hours discussing individual card choices, especially when it was like coming together, and still with changes. And we do talk about like vintage cube stuff. We usually talk about like when a new set comes out, like the cards through the lens of like our different cube projects that we have going on. Once you have too many of them, it's kind of hard for the other person to like stay on top of like which fits into each of your 10 cubes. But we certainly have this and have talked about, to a varying degree about the design. I think recently I mentioned I made this Oops All Creatures cube. I think there I was mainly like a solo thing, but I do think we did test it out. And after testing, I changed one entire archetype. And I do think that, I was asking people for feedback there also like in the design process.
Well, it's really encouraging to see, the breadth of what you're doing in the community and what you're doing collaboratively with design. But as you mentioned, you both curate your own cubes individually. For a quick overview, Sakari, what's one of the main projects you're working on? And give us a little overview of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I have this mono blue cube. I've had it now for a couple of years. When I first started building it, I had this idea of like you can have these non-creature spells matters and make tokens and whatnot. And then we tested it a couple of times, and it got totally crushed by these decks which have cheap, efficient creatures and cheap, efficient counter spells, and it just didn't work out at all. And so it was back to the drawing board, and I think now it has found a good sort of foothold. There are combo things that you can do. I actually listened to your episode with Ben Weiss and his Mono Red Cube. I know him through a mutual friend, former WotC designer Donald Smith moved to Finland. He is a former Platinum Pro Wizards card designer and so on. But he moved to Finland and he started working here for a Supercell's mobile game company.
Amazing.
And he's part of our draft group, and he put me in touch with Ben Weiss and his Mono Red Cube, and we sort of bounced off ideas in that regard. And I think he's very knowledgeable in a sense that red is the deepest color from his point of view. I've always preferred blue because you can have like anything in blue. You can have small efficient creatures and answers, but then you can have over-the-top things and artifact synergies and combo and storm stuff. So blue is in that sense fairly multipolar, that you can have like lots of different ways to go about it. And I think it has worked out quite well. We also we are drafting on the draft server with LSV and his people. So we've also drafted once this mono blue cube with those guys. It was fun.
Putting LSD in a mono blue cube is like putting a kid in a candy shop,
Yeah, most definitely. He didn't need much convincing that like we were talking about should we draft vintage cube or something else. Well, I have this one cube. Like if we can try this, like it would be nice. And, yeah, but yeah, it's been I think. From our play group where we draft, I think Mono Blue Cube has been the one we've drafted the most.
I think so too, yeah.
But it offers quite a lot of things to do. There are lots of directions you can go. I think the artifact theme is quite strong because Tolarian Academy is so strong, but I think it's like in a very good place now. And I've said this to Max previously because there's this product fatigue. So many sets come out and so many mechanics and things. I think from a perspective, if you want to be into standard or normal constructed formats can be quite intimidating because a set comes out every few weeks. But from a cube designer perspective, I think we're living in this golden age where you have multiple products and multiple synergies come about, which weren't present like 5 years ago. Let's say, for instance, in Red, they have this card, I think, Inti, where you get to sort of, if you discard, you get to exile, and then you get to play. Like those kinds of cards coming off very frequently. So there are new archetypes sort of get unlocked every once in a while, where you have plenty of support for a thing that wasn't basically a thing at all, like 5 years ago. So I think there are also like good things coming from that there are these multiple sets coming out each year.
Yeah, and you get to pick and choose what elements you want to take and which ones you want to leave on the table.
Definitely.
That's so good. Well, and to borrow from Ben a little bit, blues cards play nicely against each other, right? That you're doing a lot of things that the other player is also doing in a way that creates a good tension, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. And I also like the fact that you can play with Gainsay and what's the other card?
Jace's something.
Yeah, which also counters a blue spell, which is basically a like semi-hard counter, which is you can have more counter spells. In that sense. One thing that I also want to touch upon, I really much like that we play so much in real life, so we get to have these playtest cards and cards that are maybe not accessible to people online. For instance, me and Max, all of our cubes, we put this card Park Map. It's like our top one favorite card. It's basically an expedition map, but it costs 1 mana to play and 1 mana to activate. You don't have that in online formats. But it's super strong, and it's like one of our, I think, when we design a new cube, it's like step 1, we need to add Park Map.
Park Map, yeah.
It enables Delirium, and it fixes your mana, and it's so cheap and efficient. And if you have a like busted land which to get, then it sort of goes over the top. I think that's a really nice card. At least my favorite. One thing that I've been doing with my mono blue cube is that I have a card which is signed by all Finnish players who have ever made PT or World's Top 8, which they have had in their deck. So basically, there has been 2 PT Top 8s where Finn hasn't played blue. So
that's amazing.
But I have, for instance, I have like 3 cards signed by Tommy Hovey, who is has 2 Pro Tour championships and so on. I have Time Spiral and Force of Will by him and other cards by him. And there's this one Finnish pro player, Erno. He was in PT New Orleans Top 8, and it was a draft format, and he had an Opt, which is Opt is in my cube, and he actually assigned me an Opt, which is the specific one from his Top 8 draft in 2001. He found the card this year. It was in his box, like it still has the PT stamp, from 2001.
Yes.
And then he signed it to me and gave it to me for the cube. So that's sort of. And I turned 40 last year, and LSV sent me a letter which had Jace Vryn's Prodigy, because he had that in one of his decks in Pro Tour Top 8, and he had signed it as well.
That's like the best bling to the Pro Tour, like the stamps from the drafts.
Yeah, so yeah. I also have one card from Simon Nielsen, who is the Danish pro, who is like, I think, was he Player of the Year last year or something like that. Like I have also a card from him, which is signed, and it has the stamp from it. So it is sort of work in progress. Basically all Finnish, and then LSV, and then Simon.
Top tier.
I don't want to look down upon people who like think about aesthetics. I think it's a very important part. It's just not in terms of playstyle or like how it works out. It's not. Maybe not for me, but I also do care about aesthetics, and this is close to my heart to get these sort of signatures from people who have been in Pro Tour Top 8s and the card which fits into the cube, so that sort of ties the room together quite nicely.
Love it. Max, what's a project that you're working on that you're excited about here at present?
Yeah, I plan to talk about Downward Spiral, which is my newest cube. I think I have something like now, or I'm going to say somewhere between 5 and 7 cubes. Maybe I lost count of how many I do have.
You're in good company here. That is fine.
Yeah, Vintage Cube is my go-to. I update it, and it even gets play once in a while. Of course, Sakari mentioned that we play the Mono Blue one the most, probably because Vintage Cube now is a good thing. It's accessible online. You can play the kind of version that's on Arena, which is fun. You can play it on Magic Online. There's the Cube Draft server, for example, if you want to get kind of serious with Vintage Cube drafting. So we don't draft it a lot, but sometimes we do, and I do still update it fairly regular, at least like maybe not with every set, but maybe like 2 to 4 times per year. So that's kind of the baseline. But then I have these new projects I do. So one This was kind of big design challenge. So Downward Spiral is a graveyard cube for all intents and purposes. It's a kind of synergy and archetype cube. It's somewhere between 360 and 540 in size, so you don't always see all the cards. I often have a bunch of stuff that kind of come together. I have a bunch of different ideas which then form into like one cube. So for this one, the very first thing was I wanted to do a Delirium cube. I think the idea came when I was playing like some of the Innistrad stuff, because I think it's very interesting from the drafting portion of having to, in your mind, be okay, I have this many, lands, artifacts that go to your graveyard, enchantments. Keeping track of that, I think, is fun, and making certain pick choices that may seem odd, just because I'm gonna pick the Seal of Fire over Lightning Bolt because it's an enchantment. So that was kind of one idea, and then I wanted to make a kind of thematic cube. I haven't really done that. It's usually like the very much the mechanics first. So I was like, what if I do like this insanity theme, like losing your mind kind of? So I looked up all the Magic keywords, and I made a list of like, if I can get like one of each, there's like Hellbent, Madness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think some of them, like there was only like a few cards and they were so bad that I didn't include them, but that was kind of also one design thingy. So I kind of started from there, and then it kind of twists and turns, got to add new archetypes. There's like an archetype which is draw 2 cards, which works with like blue-red cards and works with cycling in white-red, and kind of combines in this Jeskai thing. Like Sakari mentioned, I think it's really nice that we get a lot of product these days. I think especially some of the commander stuff helps, because they're usually kind of like very kind of thematic, and there's like a bunch of cards that work well together. In Downward Spiral, I have this Leaves Graveyard thing, which is in the Saltlight colors, which a majority of the cards come from, I think it's like this commander deck from whatever set it was, but there's like the Tevar, the dragon, like a 4-mana Saltlight dragon that you get a token when a card leaves your graveyard, and then that combines with unearthed creatures and a bunch of other stuff combined with like Goblin Welder, regrowth effects, etc. So there's a bunch of these like small cycles, like there's the new, like Sakai mentioned, the new kind of red discard stuff. There's been Inti, Evora, and then you add your currency converters, and you come out with old cards like maybe Mox Diamond or Smuggler's Copter, and suddenly you get a lot of nice synergies, and that's what I like the most. So yeah, Downward Spiral is a kind of medium power level. It's not Vintage Cube. I think there's no fast mana, but it is quite a powerful format. You can do like some like not busted, but like slightly busted stuff. At least very effective, like very, very, very kind of synergistic. And like when you get all the pieces, it really works. I think Sakari has a good example. He drafted this cube, Motticon, and he had this green-red aggressive deck with, well, you can tell a bit about what was in that deck.
Yeah, so I drafted it in Motticon. It's definitely my favorite cube at the moment to draft and play, of course. So my opponent has this deck. I think there's this green-black enchantment. When a card leaves your graveyard, you get to do a zombie, or you draw a card and you get some kind of effect. And then you have the Moment of Endurance, which is this artifact. When you discard a card, you get to draw a card or gain 3 life, or your opponent loses 3 life, or anyway, but you can only choose one each turn. And then he had a currency converter and Bazaar of Baghdad. So when he activates the Bazaar, he discards 3. So then he gets to pick things from the Moment of the Endurance. Then the cards go into the graveyard, but then they go underneath the currency converter. So the other enchantment triggers again. And then he has some kind of other enchantment, like whenever, was it like a permanent card leaves your graveyard. So there come this like huge stack of triggers, which is like very delicate to perform like in paper. So there's lots of triggers, and you need to keep count of what happened during which triggers, well, which you get, because you can only choose one each turn. So it was like really complex. When I played, I had this red aggressive deck, and I had this new Turtles card, Cool But Rude, which is this class enchantment. Like whenever you discard, if you have it like on the stage 2, whenever you discard, you get to deal 2. So I had this thing where I played Casey Jones, I draw 3 cards, and the next upkeep I discard 3, so it like pings the opponent for 6 damage for each of the cards. But then I also discard Madness cards, which are lightning bolts and stuff, so it like dealt 14 or something in one go. So like really synergistic, like cards on their own, which don't seem that great, but when you have like a bunch of them together, they like turn into this machine, which is like generates huge amounts of, well, triggers mostly, but also value.
But it makes you feel so smart, right?
Yeah. One funny just like anecdote about that cube. I add the lion side diamond mainly like there's no combo like going off with Yawgmoth's Will. But there's like cool stuff you can do it. We had a draft at our office when our friend had like a blue red deck where he could play like he would play Drake Haven, then lion side diamond, discard his hand, pay 3 to make 3 drakes, and then one of the cards he discarded was anger. So then all the drakes had haste. And like these kinds of like you don't get to do that in most formats. I like it when you can use a card for like a bit of a different use case, like using Lion's Eye Diamond to cast like a turn one Roar of the Worm or like a turn one Arrogant Worm rather than using it to flashback your Echo of Eons in Vintage Cube. I also often when I make a cube, I want this card to be like the first pick. I have a cube called the B Team. The design impetus there was like I want Goblin Welder to be like a S tier card. And in Downward Spiral, I was like, okay, well, it is already a good card currency converter, but I want it to be like really, really, really top tier. So it is certainly. And then there's like some individually busted cards like Pyrogoyf for there's like a Goyf theme. There's not all the Goyfs, but most of the Goyfs. I was excited when I found it, but I think it was too bad. It's a card called Sub Goyf, which is a playtest card, which is a blue Goyf, which is a submarine drawn, like a kid's drawing, which is as big as you have subtypes.
Amazing.
So, aura, vehicle. But it was just too bad. But yeah, Goyfs all the way.
But I enjoy that in something like that, where you said you'd usually anchor to the mechanics first and then build from there, that the theme drew you to mechanical through lines that you got to work on.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Something which I do want to shout out is some tools which I found incredibly helpful as a cube designer are these tools made for other formats, like EDH Rec is really good, I think, for, let's say this leaves graveyard. Okay, there's the Teval, the dragon. Like, okay, let's look at Teval commander decks through EDH Rec and then find like the cards played there. Also, I often go to Moxfield to look at like these other formats. I mentioned European Highlander. There's something called Australian 7-point Highlander, Canadian Highlander. These kind of singleton formats where you have to like play a broader range of cards compared to Legacy or something. So then, I would go there and look at, okay, has anyone, working on my cycling archetype, has anyone played, Astral Slide? And then try to find cards that work or, Fluctuator or something. So these tools, I think, are super useful these days to help you dig for cards because as you mentioned, there's a lot of cards. Going through them page by page in Scryfall is not really feasible.
many, many cards and more on the way, I hear.
Mm.
I like to ask with folks of varying experience, and certainly you all are doing some amazing things. Sakari, let's start with you. What advice would you want to pass on to other designers as they're working on their own cubes?
I've listened to many of your podcast episodes, and I think each designer has their sort of own take, what they want to nurture. For me, at least, and I'm not talking for me, but I think for Max as well, it's basically we want to focus on formats and cubes that are very draftable and re-draftable in a sense that we want to have a cube or a format that you can always find new angles to it, and it doesn't even need to be refreshed every now when a new set comes out. But as long as the people who are drafting it feel that this is cool, this is nice, that I get to do these kinds of different things, and maybe next time I'll draft something different. So I think our focus, or at least my focus, is on this redraftability, replayability aspect. I think that's one thing that is very close to my heart. I want to find these interesting combinations and have archetypes which are sort of tied in a sense that it's not just about I'm just here and I force this archetype and I'll go 3-0, but I want to have this balance in terms of archetypes and what the person is trying to do. And it's of course nice if people find archetypes of their own or decks that support sort of several archetypes all at once. And I think that's a thing that I try to focus on, at least.
That's great. Max, how about for you? What advice would you want to pass on to other designers?
Yeah, kind of similar stuff. So I would kind of maybe phrasing it as starting by asking yourself, like, why are you designing this? For what reason? If it is about, appreciation of a certain art style, cool if that's your focus and that's why you're doing it, or just, I really like designing cubes, but I don't need them to get played. Cool, that's fine. But if you want them to be played, and I would also say what Sakari said, try to think that they can be played many times, because you are going through the effort of, like, especially assuming you're putting it together in paper, you're going through the effort of like sleeving up and doing this and that and that. So if it's kind of a cube that your play group only wants to play once and then you're done, it's like you spend a lot of time on it. So try to make it fun for more than one draft. It doesn't have to be like 100, or it doesn't need to be refreshed. And most cubes are fun for it. I think it's difficult to make one that's only fun once and never after. But that would maybe mean mine as well. Like, consider the effort you're putting into it, and try to also get something out of it, like that can be played multiple times.
Yeah, I think one to just a sort of side note, which we already covered, but I think it is beneficial if you have a friend or friends who are also a bit invested in that. They can help you out design-wise, and they can say that this stuff doesn't work at all, please fix. So, like, even if they're your, like, very own pet cards, and you definitely want to have them, but they don't play out, they're always the last picks, then maybe reevaluate or something. But I think it's good to have feedback from people and take it as such. I think when, especially with the Mono Blue Cube, I got some really harsh feedback from people in our playgroup. They are very upfront, but I think they don't mean it personally. They don't mean like you're such a bad designer, but it's more or less like saying that this thing is just underpowered compared to what the other people are doing, so maybe try to rework it to something different. So I think take the advice in that sense and try to sort of mix in your own ideas. But for me at least, and for Max as well, I assume that yes, we are designing the cube, but we are designing it mostly for other people to enjoy.
Yeah, and your friends do want the cube to succeed, right? They want to draft it more, and they want to share that with you.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, gentlemen, there's so much that we could talk about, and I hope maybe there are more opportunities to do that. I do want to ask you one final question by way of wrap up here. One of my favorite questions, which is, and Max, let's start with you. If you could have any card printed as a promo, what card would you pick, and who would you have do the illustration?
It's a very tough question. I think it's easier to decide the illustrator. My intuition was go with Eric Klug, who is a Magic altar artist. I have 3 commissions from him that he has done for me in the past, and he has become much more talented even since then and much more prolific. So it would probably be that. I'm not sure. Like maybe it would be Birds of Paradise. It has a kind of, I have a soft spot for the card, both because like it's somehow very iconic.
Yes.
Although there are like a million printings of it, but it was also a kind of a. I remember when I started playing, it was like an expensive card and somehow a very kind of impactful card back then. So I would go with that probably.
That's great. Birds of Paradise, Eric Klug, famous altarist. Sakari, what about for you?
Yeah, I think I would go with Park Map. I think that's sort of a staple when we are designing the cubes. I think Park Map is the card which it works in these Delirium cubes, it works in the artifact synergies. It just fixes your mana, it does all the things that you want at a cheap cost. For an artist who would be my pick would be definitely RK Post.
Yes.
I have a soft spot for him. When I started playing, Morphling was the number one creature to play, and Morphling has this sort of, I have a soft spot for it. And I've met him several times in GPs, and last year we had Premodern European Championships in Finland. I also met him there. He did a couple of altars for me, so I would definitely go with that.
That's so good. Yeah, the running joke is that they just load RK Post into the trucks as they travel from place to place on the tour.
Yeah.
No, he's amazing, and it's great to get to connect with him at cons. Well, Max, Sakari, this has been a delight. I'm so grateful to you each for taking the time to be part of this. You mentioned certainly Motticon has had a great 3 years so far. I imagine more is coming up. But if folks want to connect with you, look into some projects you're doing, or maybe just book some tickets to come to the next Motticon, where should we point them to get that information?
To Max, he has a Twitter handle. I don't, so...
I don't think I think I deleted my Twitter a while back, so I'm very inactive. I think, Motticon.com is a good place. You can find our Discord there. It is, we try to at least post stuff in English. I mean, if you come to the Discord and go check different channels, they're going to be in Finnish mostly. So
I think
apologies for
we have
that.
like
But
plenty of English-speaking players there in tournament. Like,
yeah,
do you have
and
like
you can join our email list, and the email list is all in English. So if you want to know about the next event happening, etc., you will hear it there first. You can join it on the Motticon.com website. I am Bloom, so Bloom on Cube Cobra. I have several of our cubes there, including the surprise cube, which is called Whiteout from last year, which was a desert cube.
We're suckers for desert cubes here in Oklahoma, so I saw that list on there and I was stoked.
yeah, I've listened to plenty of your podcasts about Desert Keep. I think that's a very good take. So enjoy that. One thing I wanted to point out, like we had Motticon this year. It was 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, something like that, and we had 96 players. It was sold out. So if anybody knows any other Cube tournaments, of course excluding CubeCon, but if there are any other large Cube tournaments running around that we don't know, we are sort of making it in the dark. So that would be nice to hear from the community or anybody else if anybody knows that there are larger Cube tournaments. I know in Germany they have had these one-day tournaments with 24 players or something like that, but something that is like really dedicated but also has vast number of people attending, so that would be nice to know.
Yeah. I know there's some great resources I can help point you to also. But that's such an encouraging place to be, right? Where you're outgrowing the space, you're outgrowing the scale, and you get to explore what's next with that. That's so cool.
Yeah, we're outgrowing we used exactly all the tables we had in the venue. So next year, yeah, we would like to get people from abroad. The furthest is one of our friends coming from Sweden, but we've tried to get that. I kind of do know we have a mailing list with some German players on there, but so far nobody has really gathered the courage to travel to Finland, which I know can be kind of, how do you know this tournament is legit and you just don't show up in like an empty hall or something? But yeah, we would definitely like to, if people listening to this are in Europe, or you're also welcome from anywhere in the world, please stay tuned or reach out to us in Discord or somewhere. And also maybe one which I wanted to kind of promote, if someone wants to organize a cube tournament, but they're like difficult to run or something. Our software is also available for use if you want to reach out. We would love to also have other people test it out.
That's very cool. And do you have a name for your software?
It's just called the Motticon app. We did, because it's only used for this, we did think about maybe rebranding it, but until such a time as actually other people are using it, but it can run other tournaments.
Well, very good. I'll make sure links are in the notes below for folks that want to follow up on all of those things. But Sakari, Max, Kritos, really appreciate you guys for doing this. I'm so excited for what you're doing, and I hope you have so much success with everything you're doing there in Finland, and looking forward to connecting again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.